This book is meant to be read as countercultural. We have misread it. In light of what it says in its first chapter, we need to reread this whole thing. If this doesn't signal that the book is supposed to be unconventional and even anti-conventional, what would?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
This is as head exploding for me as it is for anyone, right? Because I had read, if you're a Latter-day Saint, let's be honest, how many times have you read 1 Nephi chapter 1? Nephi goes in, the Spirit tells him, break the law. Break the law of Moses, break its biggest commandment. He does, and that's how they get this book, and that's how they're able to survive.
When the scriptures talk about how the last shall be first and the first shall be last, and the way that things are going to be like flipped on their heads.
It's a reverse Exodus.
Wow.
So what it's you're supposed to be disturbed by this story. What's happening here is a recentering of the world.
I am smelling what you're stepping in. I am vibing. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Ward Radio. I'm your host, Cardin Ellis. I'm joined in the studio by Kwaku L, by Brad Whitbeck, Don Bradley, and Jonah Barnes. And, there's some seriously interesting stuff going on in the studio right now. You may not have realized, but Don Bradley has made some really interesting and recent discoveries about the first book of Nephi, and reading it as a pretty radical document and statement from Lehi. Oftentimes on this podcast, we say you need to subversively build the kingdom, subversively build Zion. And Don Bradley's done some research here and come up with the conclusion that you need to read Lehi's statements in the first book of Nephi as kind of subverting the traditional authority norms, social norms, theological norms of his day, and believes Nephi's statements rise to the standard of being radical, and that we should maybe, make it a very Che Guevara shirt. So instead of having the murderer on it, it has Nephi's cool silhouette, because Don Bradley thinks Nephi was a radical here. So we might need to reimagine. I don't like that term. The socialists use that term. We might need to reconsider how we read it through the lens of kind of Nephi the radical. So Don, where do I go wrong? Tell us why you think it's Nephi the radical.
So, it's my contention that from its very first narrative, the Book of Mormon is signaling to us in not so subtle ways that what we are about to read is not conventional, that it is not trying to reinforce social convention as we might often read it, but that in fact it is trying to subvert or even reverse social convention. And by setting up this expectation in the book's first narrative, indeed in the very first words of those narrative, it is signaling how we're supposed to read the entire book. And given that we haven't seen that, I would argue to a great extent we've actually misread the Book of Mormon.
Oh,
okay.
So
this goes beyond like figuring out the goodly meant wealthy. I mean, you're saying
Sure.
we're doing it all wrong.
Well, I didn't say all wrong, but yes, wrong.
Okay, yeah, wrong. Okay.
So back in 1830, Book of Mormon comes off the press. Parley P. Pratt gets a copy. And for days, the guy can't put it down, right? He doesn't want to eat. He doesn't want to sleep. He just wants to read this book. Now, I started realizing several years ago that in a sense, there never was a first time that I read the Book of Mormon, because the Book of Mormon, I encountered Book of Mormon stories as a child and so on. And so the book was always kind of mediated to me through a lens that had already been provided to me. So with as much as I've read the Book of Mormon, as much scholarship as I've done, I wondered, am I getting at like direct access to what the book is saying, or do I always have this lens that other people have given me that's getting in the way? And so I took a suggestion from my friend Mark Wright, an excellent scholar, to try reading different editions of the Book of Mormon and sort of putting myself in different mindsets so I can just not take anything for granted as I read this book. And so a few years ago, I was reading actually the Penguin edition. Right? It's got the original Book of Mormon chaptering. It doesn't have verses. And so it kind of helps break you out of maybe your ordinary mode of reading. And I started reading thinking, if I don't take anything for granted about who these people are, what I'm being told, what's actually there in the text, what am I seeing? And what I came to see in just the course of one evening is of reading is that the very first story in the Book of Mormon, and even the very first words of that story, are signaling this reversal of values, right? That there's something radical going on. And so when I say the first story, okay, so in the Book of Mormon's earliest text, the manuscripts, the 1830 edition, the chaptering was different.
Yeah.
So most people probably know this. So what to us is First Nephi, chapters 1 through 4, was First Nephi 1, Roman numeral 1. Okay, one chapter.
Interesting. Okay.
So the very first, so that signals that original chapter was supposed to be understood as one story, one overall narrative. And so the Book of Mormon's first narrative is God calls Lehi, tells him to go out in the wilderness, and then he sends his sons back to get the brass plates, and they get them. Okay, that's the first story.
Okay.
So how does this story? So this is going to be our radical story here. Okay. So how does this story start? I'm going to argue that the book, by the way, in this first chapter, it is subverting social authority. It is subverting economic authority or economic value. It is subverting moral authority, traditional moral authority, and it is subverting geographical authority or what we'd call centrality. Okay, like a sacred center.
Yeah.
So how do I get there? So you look at the very beginning of First Nephi, and we have the words, the first book of Nephi, his reign and ministry. So assuming we know nothing about the guy other than what's said here so far, well,
he's the center of attention and he's the minister.
He writes a book, he reigns, he's a king or ruler.
And a prophet.
And he's a prophet or some sort of religious figure who ministers to other people, okay? Next words. An account of Lehi and his wife Sariah and his 4 sons being called, beginning at the eldest. Notice those words. Laman, Lemuel, Sam, and Nephi. So beginning at the eldest, what have we just learned? There's this guy Lehi, right? And he has 4 sons, and the youngest of them is Nephi. Well, what did we just see in the title of the book?
The reign and ministry of Nephi.
Reign and ministry of Nephi. So wait, the guy who's ruling?
Yeah, that would have stuck out like a sore thumb. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
We don't really take that into account because we're like that frog who was put in the water when it was cold and it was boiled. So we don't realize like, oh, wow, this water's warm now.
Right.
Anybody who is used to probably ancient Semitic culture would realize, whoa, hold on a second. What's the youngest son doing inheriting the book?
Right. The youngest does not get the throne. The youngest is not the birthright, naturally the birthright child. That's the oldest. Okay. But here, the guy in charge, the guy telling us the story, the guy who's the ruler is the youngest. Where do we get that? We get it in the very first sentence of the book of Mormon. The first sentence.
Okay, yeah.
So it's taking our expectation of like primogeniture, right, ruled by the, or sort of gerontocracy, if you will, that the oldest are the ones who will rule, and it's flipping it, okay? And so we actually get this from the characters in the Book of Mormon even. So you've got Nephi's brothers say, right, our brother Nephi has taken it upon him to be our ruler and our teacher, who are his elder brethren. So they recognize, well, we're the ones in charge. We're the ones with the religious and political authority. Like, why is our younger brother presuming to rule over us?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And
this is super French Revolution. I'm digging it.
Right. And Nephi.
Hopefully it doesn't end up like the French Revolution.
Yeah,
Nephi himself.
I'm one step away from Saul Alinsky and this guy, man. You know,
Nephi himself signals. He says to his brothers, "Behold, you're my elder brethren. How is it that you're so hard in your hearts, and so on, that I, your younger brother, should speak unto you and set an example before you?" So Nephi and his brothers both recognize the social norm that they're supposed to be in charge, but he's in charge, right? So things are flipped, and then in this little preface or colophon superscript to First Nephi, still, he says, they depart out of the land. Nephi taketh his brethren and returneth to the land of Jerusalem. Nephi takes his brothers, his older brothers. So Nephi's in charge, right? Later it says, Nephi's brethren rebelleth against him. Now, if any of you have younger brothers, right, if your younger brother said to you, "You're rebelling against me," I mean, the only possible response to that is, well, either just laughing or thumping him or both, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of preposterous, right? His older brothers are rebelling against him. So there is, and look at you've got two sets of brothers, okay? So it's told us you've got Laman and Lemuel, right, the two oldest, Nephi and Sam and Nephi, the two youngest. So the key figures here that the emphasis goes on in the narrative are Laman. He's the oldest of the older set, and Nephi, the youngest of the younger set. So because Laman is the oldest of the older ones, he epitomizes oldness, age.
Yeah,
right?
previous generation, the establishment.
Right. Nephi, by contrast, as the youngest of the younger set, he epitomizes youth.
Wait, so this same argument that I have about boomers in the church office building right now in 2023 is vindicated by Don Bradley, endorsed fully, and might even be the subject of a new book. You heard it here first, folks. The young generation's got to take over, baby.
That's right. We call him the Nephi, Generation Nephi.
That's it. I'm not a millennial. I'm a Nephinial. Okay, cool. Keep going.
So
Don, keep
Nephi,
going.
so the book is setting up. Everybody's familiar with the idea of the authority of age, but this is setting up a kind of authority of youth. Well, that's like preposterous in traditional terms, right? Because
It happened in the 60s when they said don't trust a man over 30.
Yeah, gerontocracy has no antonym. Okay.
Oh,
we have to make
interesting.
one up. Juvenocracy. There you go.
Juvenocracy.
Okay.
Juvenocracy.
Courtesy of Nephi here. Okay. We've got this concept, rule by the youngest. Okay. So it's taking, and Nephi even seems to connect being older with being rebellious, right? He says, Laman and Lemuel, being the eldest, did murmur against their father. He says that in the first chapter here.
Yeah,
Being the eldest did murmur against their father?
Uh-huh.
It's almost like he's rubbing it in. These guys should be the oldest, and they're murmuring against their father.
No.
Right.
Interesting.
So from literally the book's first sentence, okay, there's a dramatic subversion of tradition, and it's subversive. It's signaling that's subversive. Okay. So going on in the narrative, okay, Lehi leads his people on a kind of exodus. Okay. A lot of people recognize this kind of exodus. And there's a sort of Passover. I actually argue in my book on the last 116 pages that the Book of Mormon narrative here actually begins at Passover. In any case, they're echoing the Passover at the original Exodus. In the original Exodus, they're going to leave the land of Egypt. The Egyptians give them gold and silver to say, hey, get out of here, right? So Nephi, however, goes to Laban, who's like, he likens to the Egyptians.
Okay,
in one of the sermons,
exactly.
okay?
Yeah.
He does, yeah.
And he offers to give him gold and silver. So it's a reversal of the Passover. It's a reversal of what's going on in the biblical
So
Exodus.
just like Nephi's ark that Joseph Smith dug up was a golden book inside of a stone ark, which was a reversal of the golden box holding the stone tablets of Moses in ancient Israel. It seems like this now is a reversal again of everything else.
Bingo.
Oh, I just got a bingo from Don Bradley.
Wow.
What now, Kwaku? What now, Brad? Jonah?
This is blowing my mind.
Duh.
So it would be like, Jonah, if you ate a whale. There you go.
If I ate a whale.
So,
They make whale sushi.
Oh, hey.
so here you have the youngest giving away, not the birthright son, he's giving away the family inheritance, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like the oldest receiving it, right? You've got the youngest giving it away. And what is he giving it away for? He's giving it away for brass. Okay, he's giving away gold and silver for brass. What is the relative value of these metals in like every culture? Okay, gold and silver are more
superior
rare.
to brass.
They are superior in usefulness. They're superior in value, right? So there is this reversal here where he's giving away what we would perceive as more valuable for less valuable. But it goes beyond that, okay? Because he actually says that what he's trading the gold and silver for is the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is so when you engrave, you actually remove metal, right? You scratch things away. So what he's actually trading the gold and silver for isn't even the brass. Technically, it's the spaces carved out of the brass. It's the negative space. Okay, so he's trading their most precious material goods for a material nothingness that contains the symbolic wealth, the spiritual message of the scriptures, right? So he's completely, and he's saying, the Spirit tells him that the prosperity of his people depends on him doing this.
I mean, this is the ethos of the Essenes that we didn't even know existed until the Dead Sea Scrolls were inherited. This is awesome. I am smelling what you're stepping in. I am vibing with what you're projecting, my man. Keep going.
So it reminds me actually of a passage from the Tao Te Ching, okay, where it says, we join spokes together in a wheel, but as the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay in a pot, but is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. Okay, there are profound depths and messages here. Okay. Now, going on in the narrative, okay, next thing that happens, okay. Laban,
so look, I'll tell you right now, I'm an anti-communist, and you're not doing a good job of convincing me that, Nephi should be a big fat old radical. But if you want to convince me he was a Taoist, I'm down with that. I might just rename this thumbnail as Nephi the Taoist.
It should be Nephi the radical. But
okay,
anyway, cool. So we're going on, okay, and in the narrative, next thing, so Laban refuses this trade. He tries to drive them out. Nephi comes back. He's led by the Spirit. He finds Laban drunk, okay? And he does, like if you think about, what is the most disturbing act that a protagonist in the Book of Mormon takes?
What is
beheading Laban?
I would say probably, cutting off the head of a helpless man, right?
Yeah.
Okay, where does that most disturbing act in the book occur?
On the day of Passover that the angel of death would have been there.
Well, where? Right, at the very, that's when, okay? Where does it occur? It occurs at the very beginning of the book, okay?
Yes.
So the book is signaling at its very start that it is literally a transgressive book, okay? Because it has this right up front, okay? And not only that, but why is it that Nephi kills this guy? He kills him to get a book, okay? And the book that Nephi himself writes on these plates, he says, was modeled on the plates of brass. Okay, so he makes this transgression in order to get the book that the book you're reading this narrative in is modeled on.
Yeah.
Right. He's weaving together a theme here. So people have tried to explain, well, Nephi was probably justified by the law of whatever because Laban had tried to kill him. You know what? It doesn't say
he was breaking the rules from the beginning, including the rules of thou shalt not.
Right.
Okay.
The book doesn't try to make the case that what he's doing is legal. It's not trying to make that case. What it's trying to, you're supposed to be disturbed by this story. Nephi's disturbed by this. You're supposed to be disturbed by it too. Okay. So it's taking more, he's doing this in order to get the tablets of the law with the commandments. What does he do to get them? He breaks the biggest commandment. He breaks the biggest moral taboo of all cultures. Okay, so you are supposed to be disturbed by this flipping of the moral hierarchy, right? But what he's also doing is it's
based.
It's posing.
Quaku's smile's getting bigger and bigger as you talk.
It's posing the law against the Spirit. So Layman says, the oldest here, the authority, the traditional authority, the oldest, right, says, we know the people at Jerusalem were a righteous people because they kept the commandments according to the law of Moses. Nephi goes in, the Spirit tells him, break the law. Break the law of Moses, break its biggest commandment. He does. And that's how they get this book, and that's how they're able to survive and thrive. Okay. So then they're led, after they get this book, they're led out into the wilderness further. Okay. God tells them that he is leading them to a promised land. Okay. Now think about this. The idea of being led to a promised land, this is a biblical narrative. This is the Exodus. Okay. And Lehi, in this opening narrative, he's led 3 days into the wilderness toward this promised land. Well, biblical Exodus, initially, God leads the Israelites 3 days out into the wilderness, okay, toward the promised land. And so this is the same kind of thing, except dramatically, they're going the wrong way.
Yeah, they're going away from the promised
They're
land.
going away from the biblical promised land. It's a reverse Exodus.
Wow.
So the promised land is like the sacred center of the world, but God's leading them from the center out to the periphery, saying like, forget the promised land, go out to the islands of the sea, go out to a place that you don't even have a name for. So what we're going to call it is, ironically, the promised land, which is actually the place that you're leaving. Okay.
Dude,
Wow.
that's so cool.
Okay. So what's happening here is a recentering of the world. The sacred center of the world is being moved here for them from Jerusalem to somewhere out there, this new promised land on the islands of the sea. Okay. And so think about how the Liahona that guides them toward this promised land is referred to in the book as a compass. Okay?
Yeah.
Now for us, we think of compass, and people in Joseph Smith's time, any readers of this book, and think compass, magnetic compass. Magnetic compass points you to the pole, right? It points you to the magnetic pole, the North Pole. So what's happening is sort of the sacred center of the world. There's like a polar shift going on here, where instead of leading them to the biblical promised land, it's leading them to this new promised land. There's a shift in what scholars of religion call the axis mundi, right? There's literally like this shift of the axis or the center of the world. There's this polar shift. So it would be like when Muhammad shifts the sacred center of the world for Muslims from Jerusalem, they pray toward Jerusalem, to suddenly they pray toward Mecca, right?
Yeah.
There's this shift. Okay, so in the Book of Mormon, we have this reversal over and over of value structure, right? So there's this topsy-turvy world, right, where the youngest rules, gold and silver are bartered away from absences from brass. The hero valiantly beheads a helpless man drunkenly asleep. God sends a Moses to lead his people away from the biblical promised land, right? You have a juvenocracy, right? You have an exchange of gold for brass or for nothing. You have a beheading at the very beginning of the text, an Exodus that goes the wrong way. If this doesn't signal that the book is supposed to be unconventional and even anti-conventional, what would?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah,
And then look at
that's
the
true.
context, what this comes into. 1830, the year this book is published, is the exact same year that Andrew Jackson initiates Indian removal, and he's taking the Native Americans and he's pushing them out west of the Mississippi. The Book of Mormon comes out that year and it's saying, God gave this land, he covenanted this land to the ancestors of the Native Americans. This is their land. That could not have been more countercultural in Joseph Smith's time. This book is meant to be read as countercultural. We have misread it. In light of what it says in its first chapter, we need to reread this whole thing.
Oh, I'm loving this. Okay, hold on. We're going to take a pause. That was amazing. Vote for Don Bradley 2024.
Wow.
Give me 1 second.
Now, Don, they're going to start calling you a progmo. You know that, right?
Yeah, no, because he's faithful and he's not a missionary for secularism into Mormonism or progressivism into Mormonism.
I'm reading the book,
But
right?
yeah, he's reading the book. So look, Don Bradley's ability to see connections the rest of us miss is the stuff of legend. This is literally a fulfillment of the quote on the back of your book, The Lost 116 Pages. None of us saw this coming. And you know what? I feel it, bro. I think what you're speaking is true. We need to reread this. I would love to stay and talk more. In fact, we're going to do that right now. The radio program on FM 98.1, unfortunately, we're coming up on a commercial break. It's got to come to a close. We got to pay those bills. We got to let the advertisers do their thing. We love them and we're grateful for them. We're going to give them a voice as well. If you're interested in seeing more about what Don Bradley has to say about a radical rereading of the Book of Mormon, specifically Lehi's Exodus from Jerusalem, please make sure you check us out on wardradio.com or visit hometownstation.com, because this is AM 1220 KHTS and FM 98.1. We will be back in a flash. Okay, so
Jeez.
Hold on. Do you want to say more? Do you have anything more you want to say?
How many times have we all read? How many times?
Don.
When I read your book, Lost 160 Pages, I was like, I had read everything I got my hands on, and I didn't see any of this stuff. How does this guy see this stuff? How many times have we read these chapters?
I mean, the thing is that this is as head exploding for me as it is for anyone, right? Because I had read, if you're a Latter-day Saint, let's be honest, how many times have you read First Nephi chapter 1?
It's the most commonly it's the most frequently read verse, so they can see on LDS on the tools library, gospel library, the church can see what verses you read, How's that for creepy, Quaco? And they know that widespread across the church, 1 Nephi 1 is the most read verse in all the scriptures.
Yeah. So this has been read like billions of times, maybe hundreds of millions at least,
believe,
right?
Yeah.
And like, what do we not see that's in this thing, right? Like, yeah, it's wild to me.
Wow.
So after I saw this, I started reading more to see more of the things that are in it, but I'm honestly still at an early stage in that. Like, I really do think the whole book needs to be reread in light of what it's signaling to us about itself at the very, very beginning.
Okay, so now my only question I have is, in order to truly read this as a radical document, do we need to hate our family and dye our hair purple?
Oh my God. Okay.
Do we need to deconstruct anything here?
I actually meant to say in the main episode that obviously the message here is not that like the kids need to be in charge of everything. You should go totally against any sort of law and commandments and like behead people, like clearly.
No, that's based.
Not
that's
what this
cool.
is about.
I was more worried about the whole hate your dad thing.
What's going on here is I think it's deliberate that the setup up front is trying to break you out of your conventional ways of seeing so that then you can take more seriously the revolutionary message of the rest of the book.
All right.
Do you know, it makes me think of when the scriptures talk about how the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And the way that things are going to be like flipped on their heads.
Yeah.
It really braces you for that.
Yeah.
Because this is the New Testament, like another testament of Jesus Christ from the New World, right?
Yeah. This is
awesome.
epic. This is awesome. So, look, the name of his book is The Lost 116 Pages. If you want your mind blown for about 3 days straight as you read it, just like it's been blown for 30 minutes straight as you've listened to this, go buy Don Bradley's book. And also, please consider, giving a contribution to this channel, to this movement, to this vision, to this Ward Radio of ours by contributing on Venmo or on Cash App at Ward Radio on both those platforms. And for this and more, check us out on wardradio.com.
I ain't trying to bring you down, but for real, you might as well give up now. Think you got a chance, but I don't see how. Got a real tight grip when I hold that crown. My life been good and bad and all around. The more things I lost, the more I found. One thing I taught myself to do, no matter the problem, refuse to lose.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Before you go, please make sure that you like the video, share it with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please let this be the video in which we earn your subscription and that you press the alert button so you're alerted to all of our fun live streams and standalone videos and community posts. Also, if you'd like to help us out, please consider joining the channel. Members get all kinds of cool perks and benefits. They get early access to a lot of our videos and special emoticons and emojis during our live streams and preferential treatment there. It's a lot of fun. Speaking of a lot of fun, we have a super cool Discord. If you'd like to join our Discord, check us out on wardradio.com. There's a link to the Discord there. Also, you can sign up there for our newsletter. Our newsletter is a lot of fun, and you can put your email address in there. And if you'd like to contribute to the program, please consider looking us up on Venmo or on the Cash App. We're on both of those platforms. Also, if you just want to keep watching more content, right about here and probably right about here are going to be some more videos. Please check those out. And as always, for this and more, please make sure that you look us up and check us out at wardradio.com.